Okay, I'm Becky Shaw. I'm the Peatland Action Workforce Planning and Development Manager. So very loosely, that means I'm involved in sort of skills and careers and supporting capacity for peatland restoration. But I also have a role in a wider piece of work that we're doing in NatureScot about supporting wider nature-based skills and the jobs of the future and the kind of skills that they'll require. Um, but I thought what I would do first is share a day in the life of a colleague of mine.
Hello and welcome to Dell Woods in Abernethy National Nature Reserve. My name's Ian Sargent and I'm a Nature Reserves Manager for NatureScot. I work on national nature reserves in the Highlands of Scotland, and my job really is to make sure that these special national nature reserves remain really good and healthy for wildlife and nature, but also that they're really good places for people to come and visit and enjoy and experience nature themselves. So today I'm going to take you around with me on my job, and you can see the kind of things that I get up to when I'm out and about. First thing we're going to do is go and meet a contractor. So we do get contractors in for some specialist jobs like this. We've asked these contractors to come in with their digger to block up some man-made ditches to raise that water table, make it much more natural, and create sort of bog woodland. We just need to come and chat to them, and also bearing in mind that this is a protected area, so we want them to do it as sensitively as possible. A lot of my time is actually spent in front of a computer, and a lot of that work is sort of planning and organising what happens on our national nature reserves. Also, we need to get in touch with our neighbours, and that includes working on projects like Cairngorms Connect, which is a landscape scale restoration project that we're involved with. But I am lucky enough to get out of the office onto NNRs, and that can involve a lot of different tasks. Sometimes, especially during the summer, that can be helping with surveys for birds or plants or habitats, or looking at condition. It can also mean sharing our nature with visitors through events or guided walks. We also need to get involved with wildlife management, so particularly things like deer management. As deer don't have any wild predators in the Highlands of Scotland anymore, then we need to manage those populations to make sure that the habitats remain healthy. Deer can cause some damage to special habitats, particularly woodlands, and so it's important that we keep the numbers at a sustainable level. It's also good for the welfare of the deer themselves to look after their condition. Also, I need to come out on site to meet our NNR team, so I can check they're all happy and that they're happy with the work that they're doing. I feel really lucky to have a job that I enjoy, and also privileged to be doing the job that I'm doing. But how did I get here? I studied ecology at the University of Aberdeen, and then did some volunteering work to get experience, and then got a contract doing mammal surveys before moving to Aegis Field Centre as a ranger. And that job involved interpreting wildlife to visitors, showing them the landscapes and nature of the Highlands, making sure they had a good time. It also involved doing some environmental education with young people and a little bit of practical estate work as well. Following that, I got a job as an area officer with NatureScot. So that gave me a good grounding to move then into this job as Nature Reserves Manager. So the last thing that we're going to do today is go and look for a rare plant. This is the green shield moss, which is very rare. It doesn't grow in many places in the UK at all, and it does grow here on the NNR, and so we're quite keen to try and make sure that conditions are right within the habitat for it to thrive and expand its range.
Okay, that was Ian, giving a good example of the range of kind of jobs and activities that could be part of a normal job in environmental conservation. So the question I want to ask is, why would you consider a career in environmental conservation? And I guess from the overriding kind of point of view is being able to work towards addressing nature and climate emergencies. 30% of Scotland's emissions could be removed by using nature-based solutions, and clearly that involves a range of skilled people with a huge, enormous range of different skills and experience to actually achieve that. We did a piece of work in 2020 looking at jobs in the nature-based sector and the way in which those jobs were changing over time, and we noticed from that research that nature-based job sector grew 5 times faster than the Scottish economy grew jobs as a whole, and accounted for 1/3 of all job growth in the 2015 to 2019 period. So it's an area where there's a huge expansion in workforce and a huge change in the skills required. So what are nature-based solutions to climate change? What are we talking about when we're discussing how to engage in these jobs? Some of them will be very familiar to you. So, for example, careers in flood management and river restoration are increasingly prominent, particularly given changing climate and more frequency of flood events. We're also looking at coastal habitat management, so protecting coasts and areas in behind the coast by creating kind of soft coasts and making sure that we're not going to lose the coast to erosion. There's a lot of work in the future in terms of blue carbon. The sea is an enormous carbon sink and sequestering blue carbon. So also quite a lot of work in terms of some of the habitats around the coast, seagrass and the likes, and a lot of work focused on marine renewables, obviously, as we try and create energy in cleaner, greener sources. We also have to protect biodiversity and particularly seabirds, and looking at the impacts for seabirds and trying to mitigate those as far as possible. There are huge woodland restoration targets and woodland creation targets as well. So there's quite a lot of work in right across the board in the woodland sector looking at those. Green finance is a sector which possibly isn't terribly familiar to people, but is obviously going to become increasingly important as it finds a way to fund and make possible these investments in natural capital. So investments in nature-based solutions which actually help. So, for example, we're talking about investment in woodland code, woodland carbon code, and in the peatland code, which help to pay for some of the work that we do looking at these nature-based solutions. And peatland restoration, the one that I'll touch on as an example, is a vitally important part of nature-based solutions to climate change, helping us reduce our emissions dramatically. When we're talking about jobs in the sector, we need about 7,000 more people in the next 10 years. 1,500 of these at least will be in peatland restoration. There's obviously significant changes in terms of land use transition to net zero, nature and regenerative agriculture becoming increasingly prominent, and that will require the support of a range of skilled advisors. I think in terms of jobs, the interesting thing to note is the variety. So some of those will be the kind of jobs which are familiar. You might expect to hear about foresters, tree planters, ecologists, wildlife managers, fisheries biologists, people building paths, people putting up fences, hydrologists, geomorphologists, and all the ists, which you might expect to find in nature-based sectors. But some of the other jobs which I think highlights the range and the sort of scale of nature-based sectors is that, say for example, architects, carbon counting specialists, civil engineers, ecological clerks of works, and people involved in much more technical side of things like remote sensing and data analysis are all going to be hugely important in putting in place robust and resilient nature-based solutions. I'll give you an example from peatland restoration. 80% of peatland, so 1.8 million hectares of peatland in Scotland is degraded. There are all sorts of reasons for this: past management, drainage. There was obviously policy back in 50, 60 years ago about draining peatland and making it either productive agricultural land or forestry. So there's been significant changes in the peatlands which left them very much damaged. So Scotland's degraded peatlands are currently emitting 15% of our emissions. So by restoring that peatland, we can reduce 15% of the emissions from the total emissions from Scotland. So there's £250 million to be invested by 2030 to restore damaged peatland, which is a huge increase to restore 250,000 hectares. So on average at the moment we're restoring somewhere in the region of 4,000 to 5,000 hectares a year. You can see that 250,000 hectares in the next 10 years is an enormous uplift. So we need a huge increase in the workforce, primarily machine operators, so people on that wee digger in the middle there. So skilled machine operators who are familiar with wet, fragile environments, who are used to working in fairly high and exposed sites and have the technical skills and ability to use the machine to put in place the restoration activities, but also a range of people skilled in survey work, in research, in data and monitoring, so really heavily scientific roles. People who are engaged in scheme design, so that's the mapping and marking of the site, identifying the intervention that's required, putting it in place, which involves landowner liaison, which involves funding applications, licenses to SEPA, the whole project management then of the site once it's been approved for funding and is going ahead with the project management, the dealing with contractors, the liaising with the landowner, all those kind of areas in between, health and safety, and people who are really good at communication. So even in just one area in peatland restoration, you can see that there's a huge different range of different jobs, different skills, and different routes into those potential areas of work. So that was fairly brief, but just leave you with one of my favourite little cartoons. What if it was all for nothing? Thank you.